Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. We'll go ahead and get started. Good evening to everyone, or good afternoon to everyone. This is our first Health and Wellness Week promoting healthy living. My name is Crystal Perez. I'm the Education and Outreach Supervisor here for Inland Caregiver Resource Center. And I want to thank everyone for taking time out of their day to come and join us. As many of you might know, May is Mental Health Awareness Month, so we wanted to do a full week of celebration to appreciate or to bring awareness to mental health. We have some presenters today. We're going to have some chair Zumba. So
my name is Mindy, and I'm joined by Andrea. And so we're going to be facilitating our discussion today. We're with RUHS, Behavioral Health and Prevention and Early Intervention. And our goal today is to increase awareness on how stress can affect us, and also to share some different self-care and wellness techniques that will help you to care for your mental health and well-being. So I know that earlier Andrea had shared in the chat that this will be an interactive presentation. We're going to have some different activities for you to participate in. So we're hoping that you will join us in those. So if you haven't yet already, please grab a paper, something to write with, because we'll be using it throughout our time together today. And Andrea, do you want to say hello?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your day to join us to learn a little bit more about self-care and wellness. Mindy and I both work for prevention and early intervention, and so what we really focus our time doing is working to prevent suicide and reduce stigma in our community. And part of being here today and learning how to take care of yourself to be more mentally well is part of reducing stigma. So thanks for joining us for this conference for May is Mental Health Matters.
Thank you. Wonderful. So before we dive in, we're going to go over just some objectives for our time together today. We want to build an understanding about how stress can affect us. We also want to understand some different strategies to help us manage that stress and build resiliency. And also we're going to share about available resources and how to connect to those resources should you need to reach out for them, or perhaps you're concerned for a loved one. So as we mentioned, it's an interactive presentation, so please grab that paper and something to write with. And so then we have our agenda and different things that we're going to cover. We are going to understand the biology of stress and its impact. We're going to take a look at the psychological impact that stress can have on us and practice mindfulness. We're also going to look at the spiritual impact and do different activities or questions and prompts that we could use in our life to help create meaning and understand our priorities. We're going to look at the physical impact of stress and also the interpersonal impact, and do some activities around understanding empathy versus sympathy, and also covering an activity on how to ask for help. And then we will be going over those resources and have time for Q&A. And also we have a survey link that we'll be sharing with you in the chat. And also there's a QR code if that link isn't working for you in there. But we do love to hear from our community about how they enjoyed their time with us, and we take feedback from those comments and evaluations. And also, we hope that you also interact with us throughout the presentation in the chat. So with that, before we get started, we're going to just take some time to reflect on our own current self-care and wellness. So I'm going to go ahead and launch a poll here that's just going to ask some questions about our self-care, like where we're at right now. So how often are you practicing self-care? Is it daily, once a week, once a month? Or perhaps you're asking yourself, well, what's self-care? In that case, I hope you're in the right place. And then question 2, most often, what gets in the way of practicing self-care? Lack of time, other priorities, we're too busy, lack of importance, or just not knowing how. And then how would you rate your current stress levels? So we'll just give a few moments for folks to key in their response. All right. We have about half of you all responding, so I'll just give it a few more moments. Okay, and I'm going to close the poll and we will share this out. So where are we? So we have, oh, that's great. Almost half of us are doing self-care daily, followed by once a week. That's very important. We'll cover and go over why that is. And then what's getting in the way of practicing self-care? So other priorities, we're just too busy. There's not enough time in the day. Very good. We'll try to help discover some helpful tips on how we can squeeze it in our very busy days. And then stress levels. We have about half of us saying constant stress, followed by average. And it seems like not really many people are saying, what's stress? So we're all experiencing some either average or constant stress levels. So hopefully we'll have some, oh, I saw somebody that asked, like, what is the question? So throughout our time together, we're going to be using the polls feature. So hopefully you do have access to the polls feature. And hopefully that's working for you. If not, you can message and let us know. So we're just kind of asking some initial questions to get us started in understanding where our self-care is at right now. So thank you all for participating in that. And so let's continue. First, we need to understand what is self-care. Self-care is any activity that we do deliberately in order to take care of our mental, emotional, and physical health. Our good self-care is essential to improved mood and reduced anxiety, and also for good relationships, not only with others, but also that relationship we have with ourselves. Self-care is more than just making that occasional time during the week to maybe treat ourselves to a special activity, such as getting our nails done or taking a bubble bath, but rather it is a deliberate task that we do daily to help care for and maintain a healthy mental state and way of being. And that is, like I said, is both with ourselves and with others. So we're hoping that from this presentation, you realize that self-care is an ongoing practice of caring for oneself that starts with recognizing what you need and how to address those needs on a daily basis. Oh, that's great, Marilyn. So it's a meditation in the morning. Awesome. Okay. So we're going to start by looking at some of those general ideas about what can be considered some self-care activities, and perhaps thinking of different areas of our life where we can include some of that self-care. And then we're going to focus on a few of these throughout our time together. So there's many ways in which people can take care of themselves. So here's some areas in life with some different examples of activities that we can include in our routine to help incorporate that daily regular use of self-care. So when we're able to focus on incorporating an activity from each of these categories, that's going to help us feel like we're living a more balanced life. So we're going to briefly review some of these examples. And what I'd like you to do as we discuss them is just take note on your paper that you have handy and just note maybe some areas that you'd like to work on more, areas maybe where you'd like to improve, or maybe even just reflect on what you're already doing well. And then we're going to have another polls question at the end when we review these 8 different categories. So the first one we have there is the physical domain. So that includes things such as, are we getting enough sleep? Maybe even taking time to stretch in our day as our muscles get really tense. So are we taking that time to stretch? I know we're going to have some really great shared Zumba later, so that will be added to my daily inventory of self-care. Even taking short breaks to go for a walk, having some kind of physical release, eating healthy foods. It could consist of including yoga, and also making sure we're resting. And then there's the emotional domain. This includes things such as stress management, exercising and practicing emotional maturity, practicing forgiveness, both with others and with ourselves, having compassion, which includes that self-compassion, and practicing acts of kindness. And then for the social domain, do we have healthy boundaries for ourselves and with others? Do we have a good support system? Are we being exposed to positive social media, which could be really challenging in the times that we're living in? What about our communication with others? Are we connected and communicating with people around us? Are we spending time together? And are we able to ask for help? And we'll cover that definitely more in our activities later. The spiritual domain includes Are we kind of being able to have time alone to ourselves? I know someone mentioned about that meditation, that quiet time in the morning, really kind of getting in touch with yourself, or yoga even, connecting. It could be to a higher power. It could be with nature. It could consist of journaling and kind of reflecting on that inner space that you have, and also some sacred space. Where is your sacred space? And do you spend time there? And here's some more types of self-care continued with some examples. So we have the personal domain. This includes things such as hobbies, knowing yourself. What is your personal identity? Are you honoring your true self? Space, like our physical environment. This includes, is it safe? Do we have a healthy living environment? Do we have security and stability? Is it organized, which can help us kind of manage stress when it arises? And then the financial domain. This includes things such as, are we able to save for a rainy day? Are we able to budget, manage our money? Are we able to splurge and enjoy ourselves every now and then? And mostly, are we able to pay the bills that we have, which could be very stressful? And then we have the work domain. So this includes things such as having good time management, good work boundaries. Do we surround ourselves with a positive workplace? Are there opportunities for more learning? And are we honoring our break times and lunch times and really stepping away to kind of recharge and take care of ourselves? So it's a lot of information, and we've covered some different domains and examples of self-care. So now kind of reflecting back, or what are some areas that you identified that you'd like to improve in your own life? So I'm going to launch another poll just real quick to see if there's any themes that we maybe have as a group. So let me go ahead and do the other poll for us. So what self-care do you find yourself needing? Go ahead and leave this open for a bit. All the choices are there, and you can select more than one. So you're not limited to just one if there's more that you're wanting to identify. All right, a lot of them coming in. A few more moments. I'm going to close the poll. All right, so I'm going to close it now, and we'll share these out. So it looks like there's a response in every category of where we'd like to see improvement. Seems like the most we want to focus on is how to incorporate that physical self-care into our daily routine, how to improve in that area, as well as emotional and social self-care, followed by some personal self-care. Awesome. Well, hopefully when we cover some of these activities and different ideas, it'll give you a starting point on how to kind of incorporate more into those areas. And we're going to focus on more of those. Okay. So stop share. Okay. Oops. There we go. So now let's kind of move in to talk about what is wellness. So wellness is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. So maintaining an optimal level of wellness is absolutely crucial to live a higher quality life. And our wellness matters, and wellness matters because everything that we do and every emotion we feel relates to our well-being. And in turn, our well-being directly affects our actions and emotions. Therefore, it's important for all of us to achieve optimal wellness in order to subdue stress, reduce the risk of illness, and also to ensure those positive interactions. So by practicing self-care on a daily basis, we are helping to promote our overall wellness. And the goal of this presentation is to provide you with some of those concrete tools and activities, ideas to help you live a more balanced and healthy life and promote your overall well-being. So first, we're going to be talking about how stress can have adverse effects on our well-being and our health. And then we're going to emphasize how self-care can help us to mitigate some of those harmful effects of stress. So here we have our slide that covers how stress can affect our performance. So before we get into it, I want you to take out your paper and something to write with, and think about and write down the top 3 things in your life that are stressing you out. Just take a moment. Now we had lots of responses for constant stress or average stress. So just think of those things, the top 3 that are really stressing you out, and jot those down. And as you're thinking about those, also think about what percentage of your time in a week are you stressed out by those things? So 10%, 50% of the time, 80% of the time, I'm feeling stressed out by 1, 2, or 3. And then we're going to come back to this little note you're making throughout our presentation. So as you're thinking about those, and I'm sure you've jotted them all down, we're going to draw our attention now to our little chart here, or the graph. And this is what I want to point out. So we see here on the far left, we have the little stick figure kind of sleeping, and we see that over here performance is low and also stress is low. It's kind of just chilling. And as our stress increases, our performance is also going up. So we see we go into the bell curve here where we're more alert, and we kind of get to the medium point here on the stress level, and we have optimal performance. This little stick figure is just performing really well. And as we move closer to the far right of this bell curve, we see that stress is increasing, and we see that the performance is also going down. We start to see anxiety. And on the far right of this, we have high stress, and our performance is very low again because we're just disorganized. So some main points is that when we have too little stress or arousal, then we have less than optimum job performance. And we have an optimal level of stress arousal, and that is when we're most efficient and most effective in our job performance or whatever task that we're doing. So reflect upon this kind of bell curve that we have here, and where do you tend to spend most of your time on this curve? Right? Where do we spend most of our time? And when we have too much stress and we become anxious and disorganized, it doesn't allow us really to kind of access the parts of our brain we're needing in order to perform well. And Andrea is going to cover that more for us in a little bit. So just to kind of reiterate that there are optimal levels of stress that allow us to perform at our highest capacity. So not all stress is quote unquote bad, but if our stress arousal is too high, we become overwhelmed and we lose access to those skills and knowledge that we normally have, and our performance can plummet. So if our stress levels are chronically high, like on more days than not, then our brain structures can actually change and our performance suffers. So I'm going to hand it now over to Andrea to kind of take us through those that process and what that looks like.
Thanks, Mindy, and thank you everyone for all your participation so far in the chat. Lots of good comments and things coming in. So we're going to take a look at what happens when our brain and our body get impacted by prolonged stress. So Mindy talked about that desire, that need that our body has to have an optimal level of stress in order for us to function in our day-to-day life. But let's talk a little bit more about what happens when we're experiencing that disorganized or that anxious side of that bell curve for a little bit too long. So in order to really understand this, we've got to kind of think a little bit about what happens in our brain and in a typically functioning brain. So let's say we're going about our day and we experience something that we perceive a threat. Now I'm going to talk about perceived threat. That language is important because that can be something that happens in our environment, maybe a sound I hear in my house when I'm home alone at night. It can be traffic when I'm trying so desperately to get to work on time or get to an appointment on time, or maybe some looming large project deadline I have at work. It's going to affect the environmental stressor or threat is going to look different from person to person. It could also be a psychological stressor, like maybe I'm worrying about losing my job, or I've got large medical bills coming due and I don't quite know how I'm going to pay them. Or maybe I need to have a really important conversation with someone and I'm really worried about how that's going to go. So again, these are going to be unique to each person. So maybe that list that we created on that previous slide of those top 3 things that are stressing us out, those are going to be different probably than someone else who's joining us and sharing space with us today. So once we have that perceived threat occur, A structure in our brain called our amygdala produces an alarm signal that gets sent to another place in our brain called our hypothalamus. So our hypothalamus really acts like the command center of our brain and communicates with the rest of our body through our nervous system so that we have the energy to respond to whatever this perceived threat is. So you've probably heard of the fight, flight, or freeze response. These two structures are really what trigger that in our brain in a typically functioning everyday kind of threat situation. What happens with chronic stress, though, is that our amygdala actually gets larger and becomes more sensitive. So it's likely to send these false alarms more regularly. So that fight, flight, or freeze response might get really triggered when there's not a reason for that response to get triggered. And that fight, flight, or freeze response is really this cascade of hormones that happens in our body that get released and causes us to go through that internal process of am I gonna stand here? Am I gonna fight back, or am I gonna run? And when our prefrontal or our brain is constantly firing the signal when it doesn't need to, again, it becomes more sensitive and it will fire off at a minor, tiny little thing. Something else that's important to note here is that when we're experiencing prolonged stress, and again, stress will look different to each person, there's a structure in our brain called our prefrontal cortex that lives right here behind your forehead that becomes less active. So it's going offline and not kind of ruling our behavior, ruling our decision making. So things like being able to think critically, make decisions, moderate our emotions and our behavior live in that part of our brain. And it becomes harder and harder for us to use that part of our brain because our amygdala, something called amygdala hijack, has taken over. And now we're kind of functioning from this more primitive survival piece of our brain. So once that fight, flight, or freeze response gets triggered, our body gets flooded with hormones, like I mentioned, like adrenaline, to help us respond. So as a result of that, you'll notice your heart starting to beat faster, which pushes blood to your muscles and other vital organs. Your blood pressure and your pulse start to increase. You start to breathe faster and a little more shallow. And that helps extra oxygen get to your brain and to your other organs to increase your alertness. So your eyesight gets better. You can hear things more. Your other senses start to become sharper. This is all survival instinct. Another hormone called epinephrine causes glucose to be released from our body, which helps gives us energy. That's all phase one. The second phase of this response involves our hypothalamus, which activates another kind of unique little section of our brain, which helps moderate our central response. So it's called the HPA axis. And this is a really eloquent kind of intertwined piece of our nervous system and our endocrine, our hormone system in our body. So if our brain continues to receive these signals that something is dangerous, our body keeps releasing all of these hormones, and it also releases cortisol, which we know is the stress hormone, and it keeps us feeling alert or revved up. We know cortisol is also really bad to have high levels of. It's bad for our heart. It's bad for lots of systems in our body. So all of this happens without us even knowing what's going on. So you're getting a little neurobiology lesson today, which I'm sure you didn't think you were going to get when you signed up, but here we go. So something important, this little phrase to keep in mind: what fires together wires together. So that means the more that those pieces of our brain are activated by a perceived threat and our amygdala starts this whole process for us, the stress response starts to occur faster and easier. And those parts of our brain get really strong, like our amygdala. And then they again become easily triggered when a minor thing happens. And it can be really, really challenging for us to find that sense of calm if our brain is constantly firing in this state. So we really don't have this idea of a return to baseline where our body kind of goes, oh, we don't get that. So if we're continually activating this response, those other higher functioning parts of our brain, so think right here behind your forehead, become smaller and less efficient because they're not working as often. So this is why you might notice when you're really stressed or spending a lot of time on that disorganized or anxious side of the curve on the last slide, then it might be harder for you to focus. It might be harder for you to make decisions when you're under extreme stress. So it really does impact so much of our day-to-day stuff. So from our neurobiology lesson, what are the takeaways? There's lots of big words, lots of hormones, lots of structures of our brain talked about. The takeaways really are stress is a normal part of life and can actually be beneficial and needed for us in small doses, right? We really can't function without some type of stress. Our body metabolizes, what our body does with it will look different. Chronic stress is really the problem here. That's what can cause our brain structures to actually change and make us less efficient at whatever it is that we're doing, and can have negative health impacts on our body and our emotional well-being. So look back at that list of those 3 things you wrote down that are stressing you out, and the amount of time, percentage of time that you wrote next to them. So do you think it's possible that maybe your stress response is becoming activated more often than needed, kind of looking at those things? And how might maybe your performance at work or even at home in your relationships be affected by that stress? Just kind of ponder that. You don't have to share anything in the chat, but just something for us to think about. So we're gonna watch a quick video here by Dr. Daniel Siegel, who really does a really great job of explaining all of those words I just said in a much more succinct way, with actually using his hand as a way to represent the pieces of our brain and what's involved in our stress response.
One of the most rewarding experiences for me has been to study brain science and apply it to the experience of parenting. And the hand model of the brain that I use to teach parents is very useful to understand that. So if you take your thumb and put it in the middle of your palm, put your fingers over the top, this is a very useful model of the brain. And when we can actually see in front of us what's going on in the brain, then we can change what the brain does. So let me walk you through very basically what happens in this brain and the structures in it. And it goes like this. The spinal cord comes up representing the wrist, and then you have coming up into the skull, the brain stem and the limbic area, which work together to help regulate arousal and your emotions and the way you have a fight, flight, freeze response. These are below the cortex, the limbic and brainstem areas, and the cortex is this higher part of the brain that allows us to perceive the outside world, to think and reason. And this frontmost part of the brain, right behind your forehead, so the person's oriented like this, is actually the part that regulates the subcortical, limbic, and brainstem areas. This regulation is very important because sometimes we can have all sorts of things happen in our life. We're tired, we're exhausted, someone pushes a particular emotional button, and we can flip our lids. So rather than being tuned in and connected and balanced and flexible, we can lose all of that flexibility, even lose moral reasoning, and act in ways that are terrifying to others, including our children. Now, you can actually bring yourself back online and come back to the high road and make a repair with your child, and that's important to explain to them. And you can also use this hand model of the brain to explain to children, even as young as 5 and 6, how to understand when their emotions are rising up from the brainstem and limbic areas here, and how it's overriding the prefrontal area and making it so they may be about to flip their lids. So I've had kids come tell me that they're about to go flip their lids and they need a break. They need a timeout. And by even just naming that, they can tame it. And that's the power of using the hand model for ourselves and our children to help us all make sense of what goes on in the emotional communication that we have in the course of day-to-day life.
So I know Dr. Siegel's talking about this in relation with working with children or our own children if we're a parent or a caregiver to kids. But the beautiful thing is that all of our brains have these same structures in them, and they all go through the same process and react the same way. So this is really great for us to just kind of create awareness of what's going on in our brain and our body as we might notice that we're ourselves flipping our lid. So as he kind of just talked about, when we face stressors or perceived threats, we can flip our lid, and we have to really work at putting our own lid back on and making sure that we're taking care of ourselves in those moments. It does become more difficult for our brain to tell the difference between an actual threat, something like being chased by a mountain lion or caught in a building that's on fire, and a perceived threat like being asked to do more work with less resources. So every time we're faced with something that we perceive as a threat, we can go offline or flip our lid. And so we are then using our amygdala is kind of taking over, and our prefrontal cortex has gone offline. So again, that feeling of disorganized, having a hard time focusing, not being able to make decisions, that comes into play. This can also happen to us, though, if we are in a position where we're exposed to other folks that might be having a hard time regulating themselves. That can also be like a form of secondary trauma for those of us sometimes in caregiving positions. So every time we hear a story of someone else's pain, it can also cause us to go through that same kind of lid flipping experience. And the more time that we spend with our quote unquote lid flipped, the harder it becomes to put back on, because our amygdala, remember, is getting bigger and stronger and our prefrontal cortex is being less active. And it can start to feel normal or natural for us to walk around with that revved up feeling all the time. And calmness can actually begin to feel uncomfortable. So one of the things that Mindy and I hope to do in our time together with you all today is to help you identify strategies that you can use to help put your lid back on. And I have to say, I've actually taught this to I have 3 kids at home. I have 2 boys that are older, 8 and 5. And they my 5-year-old likes to annoy his big brother. My 8-year-old has really big emotions, but he doesn't have a big emotional vocabulary yet because he's only 8. And so I actually worked with him and taught him that when he was struggling to tell me how he was feeling, but he was feeling something, that he would just put his hand up and he would do this. And then I knew, or my husband or grandma or papa, whoever's home with him knows that's our cue that we need to help him put his lid back on. So we need to give him some time to process what's happening. And it has saved so many fights in my house, because now he's talking to me or talking to someone else instead of hitting his brother or getting angry and exploding. We're actually getting to what is the root issue here with him. So this has been such a lifesaver in my home, and it works. Again, our brains are all hardwired in the same way. It's part of how we share neurobiology. And so this is something that we can work on in our own lives and our own relationships to kind of help, again, create that awareness for us of when we're starting to flip our own lid. Okay, next slide, please, Mindy. Thank you. So again, we need to actively work to do something to put our lid back on and to prevent our lids from being flipped so easily in the future. If we don't, we can really start to see the impact in our life. And we're going to talk about that impact in a few different areas or a few different domains. First, we can see it physiologically. Our emotional and mental well-being are absolutely impacted by us kind of flipping our lid all the time or experiencing chronic stress. Chronic stress increases the risk of someone developing symptoms of depression and anxiety in some folks. We're still getting a lot of information about how stress, anxiety, and depression are all linked together, but there has been research that shows that those 3 things are linked together: chronic stress, anxiety, and depression. We also see impacts spiritually. So our ability to connect with something bigger than ourselves, something that gives our life or our work meaning and purpose, is impacted by this chronic stress or constantly walking around like we're on edge. A sense of meaning and purpose is really fundamental to our mental well-being, as well as our physical health and our general just overall wellness. Spirituality is a really big protective factor. So when our spirituality is affected by stress, it can present itself in a few different ways. It typically shows up as feeling like we have a lack of meaning in our lives or with what we're doing. That can also lead to a sense of feeling like we're rudderless or we don't have a direction, which can also then lend itself to feelings of depression or symptoms of depression and kind of feeling helpless or stuck. We also see the impacts physically. So our physical health and the way that we metabolize stress really get impacted. So if we're constantly under stress, we can have physical symptoms. We can experience headaches. A lot of us experience like stomach upset if we're under a lot of stress, blood pressure, heart rate. Those things all get interfered with, along with sometimes having difficulties with sex or sleeping. Many of us, when we're under stress, also wear our shoulders as earrings. And so that whole back area of our neck right here and our shoulders gets impacted because we're physically carrying around that stress in our body. And it creates a lot of pain and a lot of challenge for us to manage our day-to-day when we're feeling that way too. So physically, stress is hard on our body. And then lastly, the area that we'll talk about is our interpersonal relationships, our connection to other people. Social support really functions as an important buffer to stress, so another protective factor. And the more social supports that we have, the less likely it is that stress has an opportunity to affect us in a negative way. Not that it's impossible, but we're kind of buffering, giving ourselves some protection against stress by having good social connections. So I'd like you all to think and identify one of these 4 areas, psychological, spiritual, physical, or interpersonal, where you notice that you're being affected by stress. Go ahead and jot that down on your paper, and we're going to come back to that later on in our time together. All righty. Sorry, I'm seeing lots of things come through in the chat. I know Mindy's with you all there, but I see all of you flooding in. So we've talked about how stress impacts our brain. Got a lot of neurobiology thrown at you right after lunchtime. And then we've talked about how it impacts us psychologically, spiritually, interpersonally, and physically. And we're going to talk more about those 4 areas in our time together today. So one way that we can begin to combat the effects of stress is through something called mindfulness. Mindfulness has become kind of a buzzword lately. Lots of folks are getting into this practice, which is wonderful. It's become really popular. And the great thing is it's also heavily researched. So for those of us that are less familiar with the definition, but more familiar with the concept of mindfulness, it's really this idea of creating a moment-to-moment, non-judgmental awareness. And the key word in that, non-judgmental. So it means paying attention, again, without judgment of ourself or the experience, to what's going on right now. Really simple concept, often super challenging for us to do. Our brain, our mind is often trying to juggle and sort through so many things at once. Like the picture on the screen, right, of this juggle and all of the priorities and responsibilities might seem familiar for some of us. So we're dealing with issues going on in our world, out in the community, in the country, finances, relationship issues, all of these things. And this type of thinking of constantly running through all of these challenges can trigger that stress response that we talked about earlier. And for many of us, we can physically be in one space, but our mind can be off somewhere else, either ruminating about things in the past, worrying about things in the future. And this can also trigger our stress response. So really the goal of mindfulness is to bring our attention back to the present moment, back to the here and now, so that we can give our system, our brain, a little bit of relief from the self-induced stress that we often face on a daily basis. Now, some of you might be thinking, I don't have time to do something like this. I don't have time to do meditation. That's okay. We can practice mindfulness at any given moment. We can practice mindfulness in both formal and informal ways. So formal mindfulness practice involves intentionally setting specific blocks of time aside that's dedicated to this specific practice. I saw someone in the chat earlier mention that they try to do this every morning. Such a great thing to do. Many of us incorporate it into our daily routine, either first thing in the morning, as mentioned earlier, or maybe even right before we go to bed. Just 5 minutes can really have substantial benefit to us. We can also do informal mindfulness practices throughout our day with everyday little tasks. They're kind of like little mini wake-up calls where we remember to be present with whatever we're doing. So maybe while we're in the middle of eating or walking or washing the dishes or petting our dog, these kind of mundane things that we do. So the next time you get up and take a walk or walk around the house, can you be fully present in that experience? Think about what your footsteps feel like against the ground. What are the thoughts going through your mind as you do that? Can you bring your attention back into that present moment and into your body? Or the next time that you sit down for a meal or a snack, can you really tune into the sensations of what it's like chewing your food, swallowing your food, tasting your food? Can you notice textures and smells and what it feels like for your body to be satisfied? Or what about to be fully present with someone you love in your life? So if you have young children, maybe to feel the weight of your child's head on your chest, or to just experience being truly present as you embrace someone that you love. These are all examples of how we can practice mindfulness in day-to-day things. Mindfulness is a really excellent tool for helping us to be present in some of life's most beautiful and enjoyable moments, which can increase feelings of gratitude and happiness and relieve some of those feelings of stress that we might feel. All right. So let's talk a little bit about the benefits of mindfulness. Research, there's lots of research, as I mentioned, going into this particular tool and practice. And here are just some of the benefits that they found up to this point, they being the researchers that look into these things. It really helps calm our body down. Again, brings us back into the present moment. Our brain cannot be thinking about the past and or the future and be focused on the here and now at the same time. Our brain can do a lot, but it can't do that. It helps decrease stress and reduce anxiety. It improves focus. It can help relieve chronic pain or reduce rumination, which is the idea of like repeating those negative thoughts through our head, which can lead to symptoms of depression. It can also help boost our working memory. So it's actually working with those structures in our brain to help increase our ability to remember things. It can also help increase relationship satisfaction because it's about being in the present moment, which often we're spending time together, but we're on our phones, we're watching TV, we're not really connecting with those in our lives. It can also help our immune system function more wholly. It can also increase our ability to be empathic and show compassion for folks and overall improve quality of life. When all of these other things, as mentioned above, start to fall into play, we tend to feel better. Okay, so back to neurobiology for just a quick moment here. As we saw in a previous slide, repeated exposure to perceived stress or trauma or chronic stress impacts our brain and keeps us revved up. And then it's easier for us to flip our lid, as Dr. Siegel talked about. But we can also alter our responses to these perceived threats or stressors by adding in something like mindfulness. It's definitely something that takes more than one attempt. It's kind of like building a new habit. It requires practice and doing it more than once, and practice makes progress. Mindfulness activities, again, force our brain to focus on the here and now rather than on the past, which can lead to that rumination and feelings of depression, or being focused on the future, which can bring on feelings of anxiety sometimes for folks. So again, our brain can't focus on both at the same time. And so by practicing mindfulness, we're strengthening that prefrontal cortex right here, right? So this part of our brain behind our forehead, which controls our ability to think rationally, make decisions, all of those higher level functioning things. And therefore, we're less likely to flip our lid when we're faced with stressors or perceived threats because we've really strengthened that part of our brain. So let's practice a quick mindfulness exercise together now. So I'd like to ask you all to sit comfortably in your chair. If you're able to place both feet on the ground, that's great. You're welcome to close your eyes if you'd like to, or to turn your camera off if you don't want to feel like people are staring at you with your eyes closed, whatever makes you comfortable in this moment. And I'd like to ask you to take a deep breath in through your nose and focus on the awareness of your breath. Pay attention to that sensation as you inhale and then exhale. Can you feel the temperature of your breath? As you continue to breathe in and breathe out, can you feel your breath filling your lungs? Really just continue to focus on that sensation of breathing. If you notice that your mind is starting to wander, gently bring your attention back to your breath. There's no need to judge yourself in the moment, attach yourself to any thoughts, or to change your breathing in any way, just this gentle in and out. And anything that comes to mind is simply just a distraction. Let it go and return your attention back to your breath. And if you'd like to open your eyes again or turn your camera back on, we would appreciate that. And would anyone be willing to share what you noticed during that quick little break where we did some breathing and to pay attention and practice some mindfulness? Anything that you noticed about that experience or during that experience? Much more calm. Excellent, Derek. Glad to hear it. Sometimes that's just what we need, is a little reset in our day when we're starting to feel a little overwhelmed or disorganized, getting an opportunity for our brain to slow down, feeling more relaxed. Dakota noticed that they hadn't taken a deep breath in hours. Wow, good. Helps me, my mind feel calm, think about what I'm doing. Thank you. Instantly calmer. Excellent. So it worked. Beautiful. So that's again what we're looking for, is just that quick little like, oh, sometimes I'm forgetting to really focus on my breathing and take a deep breath. Can really pull us back into the here and now, give our brain an opportunity to reset, and give us a chance to be able to continue about our day. So you all are giving great feedback here, feeling at peace, feeling calmer. What are some ways that you think mindfulness might be able to help you manage some of the stressors you have in your life? Please feel free to share those in the chat. Ways that you think something like mindfulness might be able to help you manage the stressors in your life. Oh, Kathy, I'm glad your muscles relieve stress. When I talk about people walking around with their shoulders as earrings, I'm talking about myself. That's where I carry all of my stress. So that breathing kind of helps the muscles lengthen out a little bit. Hope it will help you get some sleep soon, Marcia. Yes, it's a really excellent thing to do right before bed. We actually have some resources for mindfulness that we can share now. They'll pop up here in just a second. So who doesn't love an app? Everyone loves a good app. So these are some free apps that are available to download to help folks practice mindfulness. Maybe something you can do again right before bed, or maybe right before a big meeting or something that you have going on that kind of creates a little bit of worry or anxiety for you. So there's a few that folks are really familiar with, like Headspace and Calm. Aura is another good one. Stop, Breathe, and Think. Insight Timer. We have a coworker who used to work on our floor that she had Insight Timer on her phone, and every 2 hours we would hear her alarm go off. And if we were anywhere near her, we would all have to like stop and like, okay, let's do our quick mindfulness activity. We hear Heather's phone going off. And then there's a couple of other ones that folks who have come to this presentation have told us about, and we've actually added them onto our list here. So they are Liberate Meditation. This is a mindfulness app that's specifically geared for Black, Indigenous, people of color communities to engage in mindfulness activities. And then the last one is Abide. This is a faith-based mindfulness app that is encouraging folks to experience the peace of Christ through biblical meditation. So if you have others that you use and you love, please share them with us and we'll add them to our hoping to grow list of meditation apps or mindfulness apps. Oh, I'm glad that you love Insight Timer. That's awesome. Okay, I am going to pass it back over to Mindy, and she's going to walk us through spirituality and kind of how we can manage our well-being here. And then I think we'll take our short chair Zumba break after we do spirituality. Does that sound good, Mindy?
That sounds awesome. Thank you for
Perfect.
that. I needed to breathe, and I was like, oh, I feel so great. All right, so we're going to enter into our next domain, and to get us started, we're going to watch this short little video clip.
Do you feel like life has a purpose?
I do.
I think so. I'm here to make people happy and smile.
Educate and entertain.
To marry my woman?
Being a mother to my 2 children.
Different times in your life, you have different purposes.
Spiritually, emotionally.
Personal, professional.
I think I'm still trying to figure that out, my purpose.
My challenge sometimes can be figuring out which one I want to care about most today.
I'm only 14, so I don't really know what my purpose is at the moment.
Still looking though.
I think most people equate their purpose to monetary ambitions.
There's something deeper than, what kind of car you drive and how nice you look.
I love to inspire, motivate, and encourage people.
Whenever I can, to be a mentor.
Being available to help someone in their journey.
Because I feel like there are a lot of people in this world that are lost and don't have anyone there for them.
The purpose of your life is sort of defined by your actions and by the manner in which you've lived.
I'm here to help inspire other people to live life to their fullest.
Like, I'm meant to be nice with everyone.
Open a world to empathy.
At this point in my life, I'm feeling like, who knows?
And as I'm getting older, I'm definitely trying to figure out more and more.
Because there are many people whose career, how they make a living, where their passion is, and what they're good at is actually their job.
I feel like I have a purpose in life because I just want to keep on moving forward.
Always learning, growing.
I think it's just that journey and the curiosity about life.
Do what you're passionate about. Don't just get caught up in that sort of, hamster wheel of getting by.
I really love animals.
Writing, just storytelling.
To share my gifts and talents with other people.
Figure out how I can live to be at least 110.
Making people laugh and having fun.
I believe my purpose is to have children, and I'm very excited for that.
The purpose of life is to experience it, enjoy opportunities, and also recognize that there's going to be hills and valleys.
Take advantage of being alive.
Exchange as much love as you can while you're here.
To live the best life you can with as most enthusiasm as you can so that other people will benefit by your having lived.
All right, so that's to launch us into our spirituality discussion. So that's our ability to connect to something bigger than ourselves. That's something that gives our life or our work meaning and purpose. And that sense of meaning and purpose is that fundamental like foundation to our mental health, as well as our physical health, our overall well-being. Makes sense? Sounds weird, too many wells. Anyways, but a sense of spiritual meaning has been shown to be a very strong protective factor against depressive symptoms. And it's even been studied where individuals in similar circumstance, overall well-being, thank you, Andrea, overall well-being, too many wells. That's what it is. I was obviously too relaxed from your breathing and in the moment thing. I can't think now. So anyways, but it's been studied that people that may find themselves in similar circumstances, and one of those individuals has that sense of meaning or sense of purpose or that spirituality compared to the one that doesn't, will fare better as far as kind of ferrying off those symptoms of depression. And so there have been numerous studies that have found those strong links between feelings of purposelessness and depressive and or even suicidal impulses and thoughts. So the spiritual meaning could look differently for everyone across different cultures, different religious or spiritual beliefs, different value systems. However, even across those maybe many differences, it's been found to be an important protective factor across all of those things. And so we have this cute little comic here. So we have a parent there at their place of work with their child. Says that this is where daddy goes through the motions. So this kind of just illustrates, well, how does stress affect our spirituality? What might that look like? Perhaps we see it in burnout. So perhaps we no longer enjoy the work that we're doing. It's no longer having that meaning or purpose that it once did have. It could also look like compassion fatigue. So we like the work that we do, but we just don't have that spiritual or emotional energy needed to do the job well. So we're going to kind of think of some different questions. So if you have that piece of paper, you could just jot these down. Take a moment to reflect on some of these questions that we have here. So what is something that brings meaning to your life? What brought you maybe to the job or role that you're currently in? What are some important values that you have? And how do those values show up in what it is that you're doing? It could be in regards to your home life, to your relationships. It could be for your work setting. And some of these are very big things to ponder, but when we can help to create meaning in our lives, it helps us to bring intentionality with every task. And having a purpose and creating meaning can strengthen our protective factor and help us to guard off the negative effects of stress. So we'll go ahead and just going to give you one more second or so, 10 seconds, to kind of just jot down, think about those things. And then as you ponder that, I'm going to tell you all a little story about the pebbles in the jar. So it's a story about a professor and the jar of life. And so it starts as the professor was standing in front of his classroom and he pulls out a large empty mason jar and he fills it with a number of large rocks. So holding the jar up, he asks his students, is the jar full? So they all say, yes, of course. And with a smile, he sets the jar back down and pulls out a container of pebbles. And as he dumps it into the jar, the pebbles then fill the spaces between the big rocks. And so holding up the jar once again, he asks his students, is the jar full now? So seeing that they've been tricked, they kind of think twice and they say, we're not so sure. So he smiles even bigger and the professor sets down the jar and reveals a container of sand. And then he begins to dump that sand into the jar and it fills in those little spaces that are left between those pebbles. And then he asks his students, is the jar full? So they all roll their eyes. They're on to the tricks, but they see that this jar is so densely packed. And so they finally admit, yes, this jar is full. So then the professor laughs and then pours his mug of coffee into the jar. So as that earthy liquid percolates the space between the rocks, the pebbles, and the sand, the professor says, now the jar is full. So he goes on to explain his point. So the jar is meant to represent your life. And the big rocks symbolize what's truly essential, those things that matter the most to you. The pebbles are what's important, but perhaps at a more secondary level. And the sand represents the minutia of life, those small, unimportant things in life, perhaps that Netflix series that you like to go home and binge watch. But that's kind of our sand. And the coffee, well, there's always room to grab a coffee with a friend. So here's the thing though. All of these things will only fit in the jar if we put them in the right order. So if we start with the pebbles and then the sand, you're going to wind up trying to squeeze in and cram in the big rocks at the end, but they're not going to fit. So that may lead us to wonder, well, how can we fit it all in? And if we find ourselves kind of asking that question, we're approaching it from the wrong frame of mind, because here's the thing, we'll never be able to fill it all in, because there's an endless supply for all of us, I'm sure, of pebbles and sand and maybe even coffee. So that's why it's important to start with those big rocks first. So when we put the big rocks in our life, we're always going to be taking care of our biggest priorities. So even if we added nothing else to our jar, we could still call it full. And that's how we fall asleep satisfied every night, because we know that we're living in alignment with our priorities, with our values. So let's see. I think we have time to go over this. What do you think, Andrea? We'll go over this little activity and then break? Yeah, okay. So let's understand priorities. So we need to understand priorities. And we also want to acknowledge that people's and individuals' priorities will differ, because we have different cultures, different value systems. For example, some cultures may place more value on collectivism versus individualism. For instance, in collectivist cultures, they focus on group goals, what's best for the collective group and personal relationships. Often an example of the collectivist culture that we reference could be Asian American Pacific Islander cultures. Whereas we see on the other side of that, we have individualistic cultures where they're perhaps more motivated by personal rewards and benefits. And typically we kind of refer to American culture or Western culture as being viewed as that individualistic representation. And also understand that this is unique to you, just as others will have their own unique perspective and lens through their different cultures and intersectionality. There's differences. Those differences in our priorities aren't right or wrong, but they're just reflective of our cultural lens and what's made up of that identity. And so our cultural lens can also be more than just our ethnic identity. We talked about that, intersectionality can also include other elements of which we identify. LGBTQ culture, even geographical cultures, sports cultures, military culture. And so our culture can provide a context of how we set our priorities. So examine what this means for you in your life as we discuss some more on how to set those priorities. So priorities are times that we may feel a lot of different commitments pulling us in all different kinds of directions. We have obligations to family, to work, or social activities, and that can kind of dominate our schedule, leave us feeling exhausted, and just there's no time to squeeze anything else in. So they're all valuable things, and there's no reason we shouldn't be able to balance all of those. So what's the problem? The problem is that too often we approach our obligations in life as though they're all created equal. We might write them down on a piece of paper like a series of interchangeable parts, each deserving equal time and energy, when in reality that's just not possible. And our priorities in real life can rank differently. So whether it's in business or personal life, sometimes we're just stressed because we treat everything in our life as equal. And so when two things are competing, we may start to feel strained because we just don't know what to do in that situation. Where do we focus our time and attention? So when two things are competing in our life, we need to decide what comes first, because those things have a hierarchy of importance and priority in your life. For example, if a friend invites me to lunch, but it's my partner's birthday, I might panic, but my partner's birthday should be more important than a lunch date with a friend. Should be. So you shouldn't have to think about it. So then when we're kind of faced with those competing kinds of priorities, we can calmly decline one because we have a higher priority. So we want to take all of our mini commitments and we want to prioritize them on paper, on purpose. And so what are priorities? There's lots of things, important things going on in our lives, but if we don't prioritize our commitments, we're going to feel strained, strapped, and stressed. So knowing what our priorities are can help us to reduce stress, reduce guilt, reduce worry, and it increases our confidence and speeds up our decision making. So you don't need to just know what's important in your life, but you need to know what's most important in your life. And as we get into the habit of ranking our priorities, you're going to become comfortable with sticking with them. And so with every new invitation or request for your time, you'll find yourself knowing how to answer. So we're going to draw out what this looks like. So on your paper, draw this star shape. You have like 4 large intersecting lines. And what we're going to do is work on listing all of our different priorities on each of the lines. So before you start kind of jumping in to do that, just think back about the story about the rocks, pebbles, and sand. So what are those big rocks in your life? Do you know what's most important to you? Those #1 priorities. And then what are the pebbles? Those with perhaps secondary importance. And then what's the sand? The minutia, the small trivial details, our Netflix series. So it may look something like this, right? So each one of the lines, and if you need more lines, you could add more, but we'll focus on these 4 lines, or 4 large intersecting lines to give us 8 different areas. And so when we're writing this down, we want to also think about the time that we are spending currently in our life on each of these areas. And so go ahead and make a little like hash mark on that line that represents the amount of time that you are spending there. It could look like this. I'm gonna say this might have been mine in my example. Way too much TV. So if we kind of look at that hashed little line there, if it's further from the center, it means we are spending more time there. The closer it is, it means less amount of time is being spent there. And then we want to kind of connect those dots. What does that look like? What shape do we see? Are we satisfied with where we're spending our time? Right? Are we spending equal time on our large rocks as we are on our sand? Perhaps we see that we're stretched too thin and we need to adjust our priorities. It's kind of almost nice to even be able to take like a different color and say, what would you like this to look like? Right? Are we putting the pebbles in our life first? And looking to see what kind of changes we can make today to help us to set goals with those priorities. We may also kind of start to wonder, well, how do we know if something is a big rock or just a pebble? And so this could be something also that changes, throughout our life. It could change next month. So this is an activity that you could sit down to do to kind of reflect where you are in your life and what right now is your big rock. What are your pebbles? What's your sand? You could also do this as a family to kind of sit down and talk about each of your individual values, priorities in order of importance, and also what you like to value as a family. Are you fulfilling those as a family? All right. Did anybody get a chance to like fill theirs in? Want to share real quick? Anything we realized from going through and looking at our, I realize I spend way too much time at work. Just saying. Okay. Well, hopefully it gives you some things to kind of reflect on and see where you're placing your time and energy, and if it is in those big rocks, and how we create meaning in our lives by rearranging our priorities. So I think we are coming up close on our chair Zumba. So I'm going to stop share so we can. Okay.
Well, thank you, Mindy and Andrea. Again, before I introduce our next presenter, I do want to give a thank you to everyone who's here. As Andrea and Mindy were saying in the presentation, self-care is important. So even just being here in this Zoom meeting, we have caregivers present. We have just, seniors, community members, we have staff members, we have, we have a lot of different variety people in this Zoom meeting. So even just taking a little bit of your time being here is also a form of self-care. So if you have not already, give yourself a pat on the back for taking some time and being here. It is a form of self-care, being here, learning and getting new information. Sometimes it's not new information, but it's good to hear the information again. Andrea and Mindy, that was great. We'll come back. They're not done yet. They still have more information, but we're going to take a quick break. Before I introduce our Zumba instructor, please keep in mind that this is a week-long celebration that we're doing, not celebration, but recognition. So we do have Facebook Lives, we do have Zoom activities. If you haven't signed up or if you haven't participated, it's not too late. Go ahead and check our website out and you can see all the different Zoom activities that we have going on. We had different little giveaways that we were doing. So if you're still interested, it's not too late. And if you're not following us on Facebook, go follow us because that's where we post a lot of our information. You can see the lives and all of the great information that we're doing. So our next presenter, I have the, we've been working with Alma Frisk for years now. She used to do our Zumba when we had it live. We have not done anything live now for 2 years with COVID, but I'm very excited to welcome her back. She has years of experience doing Zumba. She's done gold Zumba. She has chair Zumba. I can sit here all day telling you guys all her experience, but I'm just gonna let you guys experience her and her chair Zumba. So Alma, I will give you the floor.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. I am so excited to be doing this virtual presentation and waking you guys up. Are we ready to move? So thank you again. And let's start with our chair. Yes. Okay. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Okay. Let's go again. Okay, let's go. Shake, 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 shake around, shake your body line. Shake, 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 shake around, shake your body line. Walk, shake around, work your body line. Walk, shake around, work your body line. My girl's name is Sonora. I tell you friends I adore her. And when she dances, you'll know her. She's a hungry, training all kinds. Jump in the line, rock in time. Okay, I believe you. Jump in the line, rock your body in time. Okay, I believe you. Jump in the line, rock your body in time. Okay, I believe you. Jump in the line, rock your body in time. Shake, 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 shake around, shake your body line. Shake, 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 shake around, shake your body line. Walk, shake around, work your body line. Work, shake around, work your body line. We can talk about cha-cha, tango walks on the rumba. Serena's dance has revival. All right, let's go. Hold on to the bridle, jump in the line, rock your body in time. Okay, I believe you. Jump in the line, rock your body in time. Rock your body, child. Jump in the line, rock your body in time. Somebody help me. Jump in the line, rock your body in time. Shake, 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 shake around, shake your body line. Shake, 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 shake around, shake your body line. Work, shake around, work your body line. Work, shake around, work your body line. You know she's a sensation, the reason for aviation. And fellas, you want to watch it. When she whines and she bumps, she go like a rocket. Jump in the line, rock your body in time. Okay, I believe you. Jump in the line, rock your body in time. Oh, you go sweat a little higher. Jump in the line, rock your body in time. Okay, Jimmy, jump in the line, rock your body in time. Okay. Zumba. Oh, yeah. Okay, ready? Shake, 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 shake around. Shake your body line. Work, shake around. Work it all the time. Dance, 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 shake around. Senora dances calypso, left to right is the tempo. And once she gets the sensation, she gets up in the air from down in slow motion. Jump in the line, rock your body in time. Oh yeah, I believe you. Jump in the line, rock your body in time. Somebody help me. Jump in the line, rock your body in time. Oh yeah, I believe you. Jump in the line, rock your body in time. Whoa. Shake, 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 senora, shake your body line. Shake, 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 senora, shake it all the time. Alright, that's right. Look up, people, you make me wanna. Okay. They say I'm a rapper, and I say no. They say what you doing, trying to do somebody go. I just let the music come from my soul, so all of my people can say on the floor. They got a brand new day, you gotta lose your muscle. Brand new day, it's gonna
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you so much, Emma. Thank you for joining us. Hopefully everyone enjoyed it. I know that it was chair Zumba, so if you did it in your chair, if you did it standing up, it's still a great workout. For those of you that need to go grab a little bit of water, please do so. Take care of yourself. But at this moment, I'm going to go ahead and hand it back to Andrea and Mindy. Thank you again, Alma, for joining us.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Andrea, welcome back.
That was awesome. Thank you so much. So we're going to actually go into our next domain very appropriately, talking about the physical domain and how we can see impacts in that from stress. So as mentioned earlier, if you're constantly under stress, you can have physical symptoms as well. So when prolonged stress is present, what we can see is a weakened immune system, inflammation, damage to our cardiovascular system, as well as other physical symptoms such as headaches, stomach issues, high blood pressure, and also problems with sex and sleep. So let's talk about some of that linkage between stress and our mental health and the immune system. So when Andrea was sharing with us about that stress response, the immune system is also something that's activated, helping to keep us safe, right? We're getting ready to fight off any kind of like threat. So that becomes activated. But chronic stress can actually have prolonged activation of the immune system, which can negatively affect how our brain functions because it taxes our system and puts us at increased risk then for illness. In regards to inflammation, Inflammation can be kind of seen as the body's response to a threat, whether it's a foreign invader, such as a bacteria, virus, or cancer, or a transplanted organ even, which the body sees that as foreign. So even a psychological or emotional stressor. So think of inflammation as like a sickness behavior. So when our body perceives a threat or illness, inflammation kicks in to try to combat that illness. However, over time, an overly active inflammatory response can lead to chronic conditions such as rheumatoid arthritis and also inflammatory bowel disease. Stress can also cause damage to our cardiovascular system, and that chronic stress has been shown to increase our heart rate and our blood pressure, making the heart work even harder to produce the blood flow to where it's needed for our bodily functions. And when we're not physically feeling well, it could also have an effect on those other physical functions, such as sleep and sex drive. So we may find it more or less difficult to have enough sleep, or we may also have decreased interest in sex or not be able to physically perform because of stress. And as mentioned, exercise is an important part because it ultimately actually does something actively to put that lid back on. You know, Andrea said we need to actively do something. So even taking that kind of action can help complete that fight or flight response. So over time, our brain can get stuck in that on position that response to stress with our lid flipped. And what we can see is that toxins to start building up in the body. This can lead to a breakdown of our immune system as well as our other systems in the body. So in order to prevent or heal from this, we need to engage in that physical reset process. We need to do something to purge the body of cortisol and release endorphins. So let's talk about some ideas of those physical activities that can accomplish or help us to accomplish this reset. I know some of them have been mentioned in the chat. So some physical processes that you can do to help with this release include some exercise. So research suggests that endorphin release occurs about after 30 minutes of exercise with moderate intensity. But however, we want to say that you should follow up with your healthcare provider to see what kind of exercise regimen would be best for you. And also yoga. Yoga can help to reduce stress because it promotes relaxation. So it also reduces anxiety and counteracts that stress response system. And then my last two favorites, sometimes I don't know whether to do one or the other, sometimes both at the same time, but crying. So when humans cry in response to stress, their tears contain a number of stress hormones and other chemicals. And researchers believe that crying could actually reduce the levels of these chemicals in the body, which in turn could reduce stress. And the other one, which I am torn between, and I also love, and I saw it mentioned in the chat as well, is laughter. So a good laugh has great short-term effects. And when you start to laugh, it doesn't just lighten your load mentally, it can actually induce physical changes in your body. So laughter can help to stimulate many organs. So when we enhance our intake of that oxygen-rich air, it stimulates our heart, our lungs, and muscles, and increases those endorphins. So it helps to relieve our stress response and helps to soothe tension. So that's some physical reset activities that you can do. And when we change our physical state, it's a key part of changing our mental state. So overall, physical activity has been shown to have the following positive effects on our mental health and our wellness. We see an increase in our well-being and positivity, an increase in energy. We could help create sharper memories, feeling more relaxed and more hopeful for the future. In fact, research has shown that just running for 15 minutes a day or walking for an hour helps to reduce the risk of major depression by 26%. So we kind of covered the physical domain. We're going to transition now to the interpersonal, but I want to leave you with a question to think about how you might be able to incorporate more physical activity in your life and what that might look for. You know, we don't all have gym memberships, but perhaps it's, you know, taking your break from work and taking that time to have a walk around the building or just getting away. So you're kind of creating that good work and space boundary and also physical. So, okay, yeah, so also considering what maybe our limitations may be and finding other physical outlets. So laughing, love it. So I love to laugh and cry, both at the same time. But anyways, I'm going to turn it back over to Andrea, who's going to take us through the next domain.
All right, so next we're going to talk about how we can take better care of ourselves in our interpersonal relationships. We're going to start by watching a video that is bound to make both Mindy and I tear up a little bit. So enjoy the feel-good endorphins that come from this quick soul pancake video.
Oh, this is hot.
Can you hear me? Loud and clear?
Hello, Annie. So, Wes, I know you've been my boss for a couple of years now. You have been a really great mentor to me, and I really appreciate that.
So I just want to thank you for being a great dad. You're always there to support me, even when I say, no, I don't really need this talk right now, but you're there nevertheless, and it's always just great to have someone to rely on.
For the past 12 years, you've been my best friend, and I want to thank you for everything you've done for me.
You've always been there for me, my number one friend. I think we both know that this is going to go a lot farther than school.
Although I know we've only been married for a year and a half, I know I don't always acknowledge how awesome you are.
You have a great sense of humor. You're witty and sharp.
You're a kind person and always thoughtful of others. You're one of the sweetest, kindest, most thoughtful men and people in my life, and I really appreciate that. And the whole time you were growing up, you made it so easy to be a mom. I don't know if I've ever told you that.
You are absolutely beautiful, absolutely, and you are so, so talented. Keep doing what you're doing, because it is going to take you places.
Do we switch spots? Is that what we do?
Jackson? Yes?
I'm so lucky that you're in my life today as not only a coworker, but as a friend. You're someone that inspires me every day just to keep a positive attitude and to laugh and smile and stay lighthearted.
I always really appreciate how you start singing at the drop of a hat, because you have such a beautiful voice, and I love the way that you filled my whole childhood with song.
First met you 12 years ago in kindergarten, and I'm so glad I did because you've been my best friend ever since. It's the best, so thanks.
The compliment I want to give you today that I've never said to you before is your awareness of other people and how nice you are to everyone in the room.
You're very good at making everyone in a room smile, putting everyone at ease. I admire that so much in you.
You're honestly such an amazing person. You are my best friend in the world, and you always will be. All I can say is that I really love you, and I don't know, it might be hard for you to believe because I don't act like it sometimes, but I do. I like to say that I take after you because I think that you're just such a great person, and I aspire to be more like you as an adult. And I think that if I could be just like my mom, that would be the greatest gift I could have.
You're the most beautiful woman I know. I'm so blessed to have you in my life. I probably don't tell you that enough. Yeah.
All right, Annie and her mom really get Mindy and I going. I can't look at Mindy during this video or I start to cry too. So the whole concept about this is that hearing and receiving compliments and kind words and affirmations can actually help reduce stress, help us feel good. Those endorphins that get released when we hear those and connect with people in that way is really good for us. Research shows us also that the more diversity that we have in our support group, the more resilient we will be when we face challenges. So as we learn from each other in such a variety of ways when we have different cultures and different backgrounds in our support group. So this doesn't mean though that we need to have like a checklist and that everyone needs to have the same level of importance in our life, but having different people from different backgrounds, different faith communities, different cultural upbringings, different social and occupational groups, it really helps to broaden our perspective. And it can also help us to find new ways to heal and make sure that we don't become addicted to our work or to one thing. The development and maintenance of healthy interpersonal relationships really should be an integral part of everyone's life, whether we're building relationships with friends, with coworkers or colleagues, romantic partners, roommates, or nurturing existing relationships that we already have in our lives. We find ourselves involved with other people in pretty much every facet of our lives. Positive, functional interpersonal relationships have also been shown to enhance motivation, engagement, and achievement in kind of work and those kinds of pursuits that we engage in. And we are really hardwired to connect with other people. So we talked a lot about our brain earlier, but we really are driven to connect with other people biologically and in our brain. It's pretty incredible how we're kind of wired to do that. So I'd like you to think and write down on your piece of paper, and the key here is really to write this down, is who is someone in your life that you would like to connect with in the next week? And again, write their name down. That writing it down gives it a sense of, or sort of like a feeling of intentionality, like, okay, I wrote this down, now I really feel like I need to do it. So think about that one person, be specific, and write them down, write their name down. All right. So next, we're going to talk a little bit about empathy and sympathy. And the natural reaction that we experience when we're feeling stressed or overwhelmed is really to start to blame other people, to get angry. Some of us start to shut down and not really communicate with other folks, which definitely can negatively impact our interpersonal relationships. And so in order to nurture our interpersonal relationships, we have to be caring for ourselves too. We can't give away what we don't have, and that includes empathy. So how can we build empathy for ourselves? We first are going to learn a little bit about the difference between empathy and sympathy. We use these words interchangeably, but they are not the same thing. And they're really, really different. So we're going to watch this video from Brene Brown. I call her the queen of empathy. She's phenomenal. And we're going to learn a little bit more about the difference between these two concepts, and then we'll have a little conversation on the other side.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. Yeah. And we do it all the time, because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now. I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
All right, so Dr. Brene Brown has a whole series of videos, TED Talks, all kinds of things on empathy and what that means and how to lead it with empathy. She's so wonderful. So now let's take a little bit of time to think about how we can use this information that we learned from her in this quick little cartoon video here and apply it to our own lives. So remember, empathy is that ability to put ourselves in someone else's shoes and recognize that emotional pain. We connect with them because we are aware of and connect to that part of ourselves with which that pain resonates, right? So it's really, again, it's about that connection.
We're aware of our feelings and with what's going on with us, or are we aware of what's going on with us? Maybe mindfulness is something that can help us tap into our own experiences, our own thoughts, and our own feelings if we're not quite there yet. Are our circumstances impacting us? Sometimes we can't, I mean, often we can't be the end all be all for folks. And sometimes we need a few minutes to, or some time to not be that emotional container for someone else. So recognizing when we've reached our limit and set some boundaries around that is really crucial too. And being vulnerable is often a really, really difficult thing to do, but vulnerability builds emotional strength and our emotional intelligence, and it lends itself to connection. So I'd like us to think about a stressful situation that maybe we are experiencing right now, something that maybe one of those top 3 things that we wrote down at the beginning of our time together, and spend a moment thinking of an empathic response that you can give to yourself and write it down. We're often really good at offering grace and empathy to other people and terrible at doing it for ourselves. So maybe something, if you're kind of stuck here, if I'm really struggling with trying to figure out how to do it all, to work full time, to be able to go to my kids' things at school because, you know, it's the end of the school year. And so they have 97 things to do a day in the middle of the work day. How do I take all this time off and still manage my obligations here at work, but not feel like I'm absent from all of those things? So I'm probably really good at giving a really caring and graceful response to my friends in the same situation, but I'm telling myself I should be able to do it. So maybe something I can offer to myself if this was something I was going through would be like, you've really got a lot going on right now. It's really hard and you're doing the best that you can. So again, just take a moment to think of one of those stressful situations that you're in and write down something that you can say that would be empathic and caring to offer to yourself, maybe something that you would offer to someone else if they came to you. So you're welcome to share in the chat. If you'd like to, please feel no pressure to do so. If you'd like to share what that empathic response is that you would offer to yourself, you don't have to give details about your situation. Just type in whatever your empathic response is. If you would like to, it can also be good for some of us to get some other ideas of how to offer some empathy and kindness and grace to ourselves if we need it, if we see it from other people. Oftentimes also our culture in America, thinking as Mindy talked about kind of different cultural perspectives in the United States, we're very kind of individualistic in our cultural day-to-day life. It often doesn't value this kind of understanding or empathy towards ourselves. We're often real hard on ourselves, our own worst critics. But again, we can't give away what we don't have. We can't pour from an empty cup. So in order to have true empathy and compassion for other people, we have to first start with ourselves. So having empathy for ourselves really can be a form of self-care and help to promote wellness, overall wellness for ourselves. Thank you, Dakota, for sharing your response there in the chat. We love it. Okay, another way to build empathy with ourselves is to use resources that we have at our disposal to help with personal growth. We're pretty familiar with helping others, like especially many of you being in the caregiving capacity that you're in and day out. And we often are really good at encouraging other people to seek out help. But we want to talk and emphasize today that the importance of being vulnerable and receiving help for ourselves. That is really a sign of self-care. So we're going to visit with Dr. Brene Brown one more time, and she's going to share some more words of wisdom on asking for help.
How many of you think you want to be more vulnerable and dare greatly? How many of you are comfortable asking for help? Yeah, right. Yeah. That was awesome. Then it sucks. Yeah.
Asking for help from whom?
Right. How many of you had rather give help than ask for help? Okay, so let me just ruin this for you. When you cannot ask for help without self-judgment, you are never really offering help without judgment. So if
Stand up and tell the truth. Okay, let's hear that one again. I gotta write that down.
No,
I hear it better when I write it down.
This one was devastating for me because where are my social workers? Yes. Hello. Okay, so we're professional help givers. But how many of us are good at asking for it? Here's the bottom line. Ready? When you cannot accept and ask for help without self-judgment, then when you offer other people help, you are always doing so with judgment. always, because you have attached judgment to asking for help. And so one way I got a lot of my worth for a lot of years was helping other people.
Yeah.
But I would never ask for help, which meant every time I was helping you, I was judging you. And when you extract worthiness for helping people, that's judgment. That's judgment. When you don't extract worthiness and you think, I'm just helping you because one day I'm going to need help, that's connection. That's vulnerability. Yeah.
Well, you teaching tonight, girl. You teaching.
So being a clinician, a therapist, that one like got me right in the feels. I was like, oh boy, okay, how much of my life in this helping profession have I spent judging people without realizing that's what I was doing, because I was afraid to ask for help for myself. So really got me, somebody in a helping profession, those of you in that caregiving role where we think we have to do it all, lends itself to that kind of silent judgment that we may not recognize is happening. So it really shows us that in order to be the best helpers that we can be, whatever capacity that shows up in, that we have to be open to receiving help as well. So let's all work on being the best helpers possible for, again, whatever capacity that looks like for us, being vulnerable to receive help so that we can truly give help, because we can't give away what we're not giving. So think of a time that you might have needed help or that you might need help coming up in our next quick activity. So on your piece of paper, think of a problem or a challenge that you're experiencing right now. It could be related to one of those top 3 things that you identified earlier that's causing you stress. So think of that thing, take a minute, write that thing down, or if you don't want to write anymore and you're like, I need to draw, I need to get those creative parts of my brain moving, and draw a picture, something that represents that challenge, so that upcoming challenge or current challenge that you're dealing with. And then under that statement or drawing that you just put down, draw 3 boxes that look like what's going to pop up here on the screen. And in those 3 boxes, you're going to either draw or write something that represents what kind of help it is that you're going to ask from other people. So in this particular instance, the upcoming challenge is a move, which, oh my goodness, is like probably one of the most stressful things someone can go through. And that I recognize that this was me, that I need someone to watch my children, that I really need someone to listen to me when I need to vent and I'm just overwhelmed, and that I could really use a little bit of extra grace and compassion because I'm feeling very stressed. And so after that, under those images or quick statements, identify someone specific that you're going to ask. Thanks, Cindy. So for watching my kids, I'll reach out to my friends that I have or my sister. For listening, I'm going to rely on my friends at work, which is Mindy. So I would cross it out and put Mindy specifically because she always makes me laugh. And then for that compassion, I'm going to turn to myself and I'm going to work on practicing that self-empathy and making statements like, I'm doing the best that I can. This is a lot going on, right? Those things. So this is a good way to kind of like get all of that stuff out of our head and onto paper. Again, creates a little bit of intentionality with it, and then can help us identify like who we would ask for those specific things. So just a quick reminder for us that asking for help is really an important part of developing and building our support system. Support groups and support from others can really help make us more resilient when we face challenges, but sometimes it's difficult for us to reach out and to ask for help. It takes that vulnerability that Dr. Brene Brown talks about. So this is a good activity to kind of reinforce that skill of asking for help, or begin to start that practice of asking for help. Sharing your plans with other people and kind of creating an accountability partner can help with that as well. Kind of then people have something to check in on. So some other ways that we can work on strengthening our, thanks Mindy for addressing that question, strengthening our interpersonal relationships is to protect them, to help protect from the effects of stress. So some other things we can do are like write a letter of gratitude. So we watched that video of folks verbally expressing gratitude and affirmations to each other. Sometimes that's tough for us to do, so write a letter. You can either then call the person and read it out loud because you've got it to read from, or you could send a good old-fashioned piece of snail mail because somebody probably wants to receive something other than a bill, or your car warranty is expired, right? Piece of mail. So send it in the mail to them so that they have the opportunity to read that. That kind of thing can really reinforce that relationship, and we all love to know that someone's thinking about us. Create a gratitude jar. Mindy actually did this for us here on our floor at work. And write something down, pop it in there a couple times a week. And every once in a while in staff meeting, we'll pull them out and read like what folks are grateful for that's happened either here at work or just kind of in their life. It gives us an opportunity to connect with one another. Gratitude has been shown to be linked to positive mental health outcomes and can help us really develop this true appreciation for little and big things in our lives. Have a generosity marathon. So identify maybe a handful of things in a given day that you can do anonymously at work. Like leave notes of encouragement for folks. That happened in one of our county building parking lots. A team went around and wrote lots of positive notes on Post-its and started putting them on people's car windows. And then when everyone was leaving in the evening, they had this really nice little note of encouragement. And folks were really excited about it. We still don't know who did it, but we know that it happened. So you can do little things like that, writing notes of appreciation, gratitude for each other, buying someone coffee, you know, the whole, like the line at Starbucks, we pay it forward that way. Little things like that can mean a lot to folks. And if you are the beneficiary of an act of kindness, however big or small, pay it forward. It's a really good way to build morale for ourselves and for other people. And even if you're the only one to do it, it feels better when we do nice things. And there's research that shows that witnessing someone else receiving an act of kindness or an altruistic act actually fires off those neurons in our brain to increase our endorphins that make us happy. So even just witnessing it can do that. So as we enter the final piece of our time together, we wanted to give you an opportunity to revisit some of those questions we had at the beginning about self-care, and we're going to go ahead and do one more poll here with you all. Give me just, oh, Mindy, you're fast. Thank you. So a couple questions for you to ask. In closing here, I feel equipped to incorporate new ideas of self-care into my daily routine. And then one of the ways I can promote my well-being is by, and we give you a few different options there, like saying no to extra responsibilities. And remember, no is a complete sentence. Practicing self-empathy, slowing down in your day-to-day, asking for help from someone. So just a few examples there. And we're hoping that you feel a little more equipped to incorporate some self-care into your day-to-day life. We'll give you all just a few more seconds to answer, because Mindy's going to have to go through resources. That's the word I was wanting. It left my brain for a second. Oh my gosh. Okay, let's cut our poll off here and share out. So a good portion of us are feeling like, yes, we've got some ideas, and others of us are getting there. Awesome. Being here today is, as Crystal mentioned, a step in the right direction. So thanks for spending time with us today. And the responses for how you're going to promote your well-being are kind of mixed throughout. So some of us wanting to practice a couple of different ways there. That's awesome. I'm going to stop sharing that and go on to just ask each of us again to take a moment to think about some of the things that we've talked about today, and maybe identify 3 things that you would like to do differently now that you understand how stress affects your well-being and does so in those kind of various ways that we've talked about. So before we move on to close out our time together, I wanted just to leave you with a quote that you see here on your screen. Learning to love yourself is like learning to walk. Essential, life-changing, and the only way to stand tall. Sometimes taking care of ourselves is something that we need to learn how to do. Our self-care and our wellness is important because we can't pour from an empty cup. Remember, we cannot give away what we don't have. And so now Mindy's going to cover some resources with us in the last few minutes we have together that are available to you should you or someone you know need additional support to help with your self-care and wellness. And I saw Mindy dropped our survey link in the chat. Please take some time to fill that out. We do really value your comment and feedback.
Thanks, Andrea. And I know these handouts or PowerPoint will be available to you. So I will go through them just very briefly and quickly in the sake of time. But there's National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, so you can call that number and reach out to somebody or a counselor if you're concerned about yourself or somebody else. There's also the text line. You can text home or hello to 741-741 and get support via text. We also have our helpline, which is local to Riverside County. And so that's on the screen there, 951-686-HELP. And it's a crisis center for our local area, but they're going to be more familiar with available resources to Riverside County. There's also 211 for searching for other reduced cost services. And then also, I skipped down one. There's the search engines, connectie.org and cvhip.com. Go back up there. There's our CARES line for Medi-Cal beneficiaries seeking substance abuse or mental health services. And also we have a peer support chat line. So that's an online virtual chat for a peer with supports for 16 and over. It's takemyhand.co and it's from 8 to 5. We also have mental health urgent care centers. There's one in each region of the county. It's 18 and over for Riverside and 13 and over for Palm Springs and Paris. And this is not hospitalization. It's all voluntary. It's a walk-in location, open 24/7. And so it's a safe place for someone to go who's having concerning thoughts, needs support from paraprofessionals such as peers, and also professionals such as counselors and psychiatrists, nurses. People can stay there for 23 hours and 59 minutes, just not a full day. And everyone is welcome there regardless of insurance type or ability to pay. So it's a wonderful resource. We have a variety of services in PEI, the program that we are from, all the way from pregnancy, all the way to older adults. I know Inland Caregiver Resource Center has some of our PEI programs that are just wonderful, and they do a great job with the community. We also offer a variety of other virtual trainings that cover Mental Health 101, building resiliency and understanding trauma, and also Know the Signs, which is a suicide prevention one. And we're getting back to doing some in-person trainings in regards to suicide prevention and mental health first aid. So there's that. You can contact us for more information about when those will happen. And then we also have some just websites to leave you with. So for additional support information, there's NAMI.org, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. Know the Signs, which is suicideispreventable.org. This is where we pull our Know the Signs training from and just walk people through that resource of that website and go through examples. It's really great if you're able to attend. And then we have uptoriverside.org, which is our local campaign. There's resources, information, how to support somebody, how to get help, and a lot of information there as well for the rest of the activities remaining for May's Mental Health Month. So check out the calendar and guide. And then we have Take Action for Mental Health. This is our ongoing statewide mental health movement. The Take Action campaign is designed to help you check in, learn more, and get support for your own mental health and the mental health of someone that you care about. So that's that. It's a lot of information. Woo, look at that, right at 3 o'clock. So I know that Andrea did share that link in the chat. And also if the link isn't working, then we have a QR code for you to access our link. And so you can share with us how you enjoyed today's presentation. And just thank you all for being such a great group and participating. Thank you for having the Zoom book, Crystal. That was amazing.
Thank you, Andrea, and thank you, Mindy, and thank you to everyone who came. Mindy and Andrea did leave their survey in the chat box, and the screen has the QR code. So if you just take a picture of it, like you're going to take a picture of it with your phone, please give us some feedback. I also have a survey at the end of this Zoom meeting. Once you exit or once it's over, it'll come up as a pop-up. It's very quick, couple questions. It's just your feedback on how we can do better. Any ideas or comments from you guys, it's always great. But thank you everyone for joining us. Let us know what we can do for future conferences and future Zoom meetings. And I hope you all have a beautiful rest of your Wednesday. Bye everybody.